Picture the surface of the Black Sea at dawn. The water is dark, not blue, not green, but something older. A color that belongs to depth and silence. The waves roll slowly, their crests touched by the first pale light of morning. Gulls circle overhead, calling to no one. The wind carries salt and cold. But beneath that surface, beyond the reach of sunlight, beyond the zone where fish still swim and currents still stir, there lies another world entirely. A world of stone and silt, of sunken valleys and riverbeds that have not felt the sun in 7,000 years. A world where the shapes of human hands, carved wood, stacked stone, woven reed, rest in perfect stillness, preserved by the chemistry of darkness. This is not a sea like others. It is a grave, a library, a mirror reflecting an age before writing, before empire, before the first cities rose along the Tigris and the Nile. The Black Sea does not forget. Its depths hold the memory of a catastrophe so vast that it echoed through generations, passed mouth to mouth, fire to fire, until it became myth, until it became scripture, until it became the story every culture tells in some form or another, the story of the flood. But what if that story is not just allegory? What if beneath these waves there truly lies a drowned civilization? A world erased not by war or famine, but by water, sudden, relentless, unstoppable? What if the flood was real? This is the story of the cities beneath the Black Sea, a story written in sediment and sonar, in ancient shells and submerged stone. A story that begins not with answers, but with a question whispered by the water itself. Asterisk, what did we lose when the sea came in? In the early 1990s, two geologists, William Ryan and Walter Pittman, were studying something most people never think about, the shape of the ocean floor. They worked at Columbia University's Lamont Doherty Earth Observatory, a place where scientists peer into the planet's memory using sonar, sediment cores, and seismic waves. Their tools could see through water and time, revealing landscapes hidden for millennia. Ryan and Pittman were mapping the floor of the Black Sea, and what they found did not make sense. Beneath the salt water, beneath the anoxic depths where nothing decays and nothing breathes, they discovered the unmistakable contours of a river valley. Not just one, dozens. Entire drainage systems carved into the bedrock, flowing eastward and northward, converging toward a basin that should have been dry. These were not underwater rivers. They were drowned rivers. Rivers that had once flowed through open air, under open sky, carrying snowmelt from distant mountains down into a vast freshwater lake. A lake that sat hundreds of feet below sea level, isolated from the Mediterranean by a thin ridge of land at the Bosporus Strait. But something had changed. The Mediterranean had risen. The glaciers of the last ice age had melted. And eventually, the weight of all that water found the weakest point in the ridge. It broke through. Ryan and Pittman's data told the story in cross-sections and depth measurements. Around 7,600 years ago, seawater began pouring through the Bosporus in a torrent unlike anything witnessed in human history. The flow was not gentle. It was not gradual. It was a waterfall. 10 cubic miles of seawater per day, roaring through the strait with the force of 200 Niagara Falls. The sound alone would have been heard for miles. A constant, deafening thunder that never stopped. And below that waterfall, the freshwater lake began to rise, 1 foot per day. Then 2, the shoreline retreating inward, swallowing the river deltas, the wetlands, the fishing camps, the settlements where people had lived for generations. Within months, the lake had become a sea. Within a year, it had drowned an area the size of Florida. The map Ryan and Pittman published in 1996 was not just a scientific diagram. It was a revelation. It suggested that the single most enduring myth in human history, the myth of the Great Flood, might have a basis in geological fact. And if that was true, then somewhere beneath the Black Sea, there might still be evidence of the people who lived through it. Imagine standing on the shore of that lake 7,600 years ago. The sky is clear. The water is calm. In the distance, mountains rise like the spine of the world, their peaks still crowned with snow, even in summer. Reeds grow thick along the shallows, rustling in the morning breeze. Birds nest in the marsh. Fish leap in the silver light. This is home. Your people have lived here for as long as memory holds. Your grandparents fished these waters. Your ancestors built the first reed houses on the high ground above the delta. The lake provides everything: water, fish, clay for pottery, roots for trade. But lately, something has changed. The elders speak of strange signs. The water tastes different, sharper, heavier. Fish are dying in the shallows. The birds have stopped singing. And then, one morning, you hear it. A sound like distant thunder, but it does not fade. It grows. It becomes a roar that shakes the ground beneath your feet, a sound so vast it seems to come from the earth itself. You walk to the western shore, where the land rises toward the hills. Others are already there, standing in silence, staring, and you see it. A wall of white water, impossibly high, crashing down from the ridge that once separated your world from the endless sea beyond. The waterfall does not stop. It pours and pours, day and night, a wound in the world that will not close. At first, the lake seems to absorb it, but by the second day, the shoreline has moved. By the third, the reeds are submerged. By the 10th, the fishing camps are underwater. You gather what you can carry: seeds, tools, fire, children. You move inland, following the high ground, watching the water chase you like a living thing. Behind you, the villages vanish. The orchards drown. The pathways you walked every day of your life disappear beneath a sea that has no end. You do not know it yet, but you are a refugee. You are the survivor of an apocalypse. And the story you carry with you, the story of the water that rose and drowned the world, will be told for 7,000 years. Before the flood, the Black Sea basin was a landscape of quiet abundance. The lake sat in a bowl of ancient stone, fed by rivers that flowed from the Caucasus, the Balkans, the plains of what would one day be Ukraine and Romania. The climate was temperate. The winters mild, the summers long. Along the shores, people built small settlements. Nothing grand, nothing monumental. Reed huts with thatched roofs. Stone hearths for cooking, wooden piers extending into the shallows for fishing. They were not Bronze Age kings. They left no written records, no temples, no palaces. They were Neolithic villagers, living in the long twilight between the end of the Ice Age and the rise of agriculture. But they were not primitive. They knew how to weave nets from plant fiber. They carved fishhooks from bone. They shaped clay into vessels that could hold water, grain, and oil. They traded obsidian from Anatolia and flint from the Dniester. They understood the migrations of fish and the cycles of the moon. They had language. They had songs. They had stories. And they had stability. For perhaps 1,000 years, the lake level remained constant. The shoreline was fixed. Villages could be built in the same place generation after generation. The dead could be buried in the same sacred ground as their ancestors. This was a world in balance. Herders moved their flocks along the river valleys. Farmers planted early strains of wheat and barley on the terraces above the floodplain. Fishermen paddled dugout canoes into the lake at dawn, casting nets into water so clear you could see the stones on the bottom. There were no walls, no armies, no borders, just the rhythm of seasons, the patience of survival, and the trust that tomorrow would look like today. Until the day it didn't. The Black Sea deluge hypothesis, as Ryan and Pittman-esque theory came to be known, did not arrive quietly into the world of academia. It landed like a thunderclap. Some hailed it as a breakthrough, a rare moment when geology and mythology intersected in verifiable fact. Others dismissed it as speculative storytelling dressed in scientific language. The debate that followed revealed something deeper than just disagreement over sediment layers and radiocarbon dates. It revealed a tension at the heart of how we understand the past. On one side stood the catastrophists, scientists who believed that sudden, dramatic events shaped history more than slow, incremental change. They pointed to the sonar maps, the freshwater shells buried beneath saltwater layers, the abrupt shift in sediment composition around 7,600 years ago. On the other side stood the gradualists, those who argued that the lake's transformation into a sea was slower, gentler, stretched over centuries rather than months. They questioned whether a flood of that magnitude would have left clearer evidence in the archaeological record. And in the middle, unspoken but impossible to ignore, loomed the question of myth. Could the flood that drowned the Black Sea basin be the same flood remembered in the Epic of Gilgamesh? In the Book of Genesis? In the Greek story of Deucalion, the Hindu tale of Manu, the Sumerian account of Ziusudra, every ancient culture has a flood myth. Everyone describes a world-ending deluge, a handful of survivors, and a new beginning born from water. For centuries, these stories were treated as allegory, moral lessons cloaked in metaphor. But what if they were memory? What if the flood was not a parable, but a record? Ryan and Pittman did not claim to have proven the connection, but they opened the door. And through that door, a question slipped into the world that science alone could not answer. Asterisk. How much of mythology is just history we've forgotten how to read? Asterisk. The story of Noah is one of the oldest narratives in human civilization. It appears in the Hebrew Bible, but its roots run deeper. The Babylonians told it as the tale of Utnapishtim, the man who survived the deluge sent by the gods and was granted immortality. The Sumerians carved it into clay tablets 4,000 years ago, describing Ziusudra, the king who built a great boat and preserved the seed of all living things. In every version, the structure is the same: a warning, a vessel, a rising flood, a family saved, a world reborn. For millennia, scholars debated whether the flood was literal or symbolic. Was it a teaching tool meant to illustrate divine judgment and mercy? Or was it an echo of something that truly happened? A catastrophe so vast, it was burned into the collective memory of every culture that survived it. The Black Sea deluge hypothesis offered a third possibility. What if the flood was both? What if it was a real event, localized but devastating? It became mythologized over generations, expanding in scope and meaning until it transformed from regional disaster into cosmic parable. Consider the survivors. Imagine a family fleeing the rising water, carrying with them not just tools and seeds, but stories. Stories of the world before. Stories of the day the sea came in. Stories of the animals they saved, the boat they built, the high ground they found. Those survivors would have traveled. They would have carried their trauma with them, woven into every aspect of their culture. And as they settled in new lands, Mesopotamia, Anatolia, the Levant, they would have passed those stories to their children, and their children's children, and so on, until the memory of a drowned lake in the Black Sea became the memory of a drowned world, until a regional catastrophe became a universal myth. The flood was not invented. It was remembered. And in that remembering, it became something larger than history. It became a symbol of humanity's most primal fear, that the world we know can end, suddenly and without mercy, beneath the weight of water. For years, the Black Sea deluge hypothesis remained just that, a hypothesis. There was geological evidence, yes, sediment cores, sonar maps, but without direct archaeological proof, without the ruins of actual settlements, the remnants of human life, the theory remained in the realm of educated speculation. Then, in the late 1990s and early 2000s, something extraordinary began to happen. Marine archaeologists, using increasingly sophisticated sonar and submersible technology, started finding things. Not just riverbed contours, not just ancient shorelines, structures. Off the coast of Bulgaria, near the modern port of Varna, researchers detected unusual formations at depths of nearly 300 feet. Rectangular patterns, stone alignments, wooden beams still intact after millennia in the Anoxic Deep. In 1999, a team led by explorer Robert Ballard, the same man who discovered the wreck of the Titanic, launched an expedition specifically to search for evidence of pre-flood settlements. They found them. Ballard's sonar scans revealed what appeared to be ancient building foundations, collapsed walls, and carved timbers lying in perfect preservation on the seafloor. Radiocarbon dating of wood samples returned dates consistent with the period just before the flood, around 7,500 to 8,000 years ago. These were not natural formations. They were human. The structures were modest, nothing like the grand ruins of Egypt or Mesopotamia, but they didn't need to be. Their significance lay not in their size, but in their location. They were submerged. They were proof that people had lived on land that was now beneath 300 feet of seawater, that they had built homes, carved wood, stacked stone, that they had lived, worked, and died on shores that no longer existed. The vanished world was real, and it was still down there, waiting in the dark. In one of the strangest and most telling discoveries from the Black Sea floor, scientists found something that should not have been there. Shells. Not saltwater shells, those were expected. But beneath them, buried in deeper, older layers of sediment, they found the delicate, fragile remnants of freshwater mollusks, snails, clams, tiny spiral shells that once lived in cold, clear lake water. These creatures cannot survive in salt. They die within hours of exposure to ocean water. Yet here they were, perfectly preserved, lying in strata that predated the flood. Above them, in the younger layers, only saltwater species appeared. The transition was sharp, sudden, catastrophic. It was as if someone had drawn a line in time and said, asterisk here, the lake ended. Here, the sea began. Asterisk. The shells told a story more eloquently than any human record could. They were silent witnesses to the drowning, proof that the water had changed, and changed fast. To hold one of those shells in your hand, pulled from the depths of the Black Sea, is to hold the memory of a world that drowned. Small, fragile, extinct, a life ended by forces it could not comprehend. Not everyone died. That is the part of the story often overlooked. The flood was a catastrophe, yes, but it was not instantaneous. It was not a wall of water that obliterated everything in a single day. It was a rising, slow enough to flee, fast enough to lose everything. The people who lived on the shores of the Black Sea Lake had time, weeks, perhaps months, to realize what was happening, to gather what they could carry, to leave behind what they could not. They became refugees. And like all refugees, they did not simply vanish. They moved. Archaeologists and anthropologists have long noted a curious pattern in the Neolithic period following 7600 BCE. Across southeastern Europe and the Near East, there is evidence of new populations arriving, people with distinct pottery styles, different building techniques, unfamiliar burial practices. Some scholars propose these were the survivors of the Black Sea flood. They would have traveled in small groups, following rivers and coastlines, seeking new land, new water, new places to begin again. They carried with them seeds and livestock, tools and knowledge, and most importantly, stories. Stories of the water that swallowed the world. These migrants did not arrive as conquerors. They arrived as survivors. And in the places they settled, the coasts of Anatolia, the valleys of Mesopotamia, the plains of southeastern Europe, they integrated, intermarried, and shared what they knew. They brought farming techniques, fishing methods, New words for water, for flood, for loss. And perhaps in those new places, they told their children about the lake that became a sea, about the day the world changed, about the sound of the water rising in the night. Those children told their children, and the story traveled further than the refugees ever could. Robert Ballard was not the first person to wonder what lay beneath the Black Sea, but he was the first to go looking with the tools to actually find it. Ballard was famous for deep-sea exploration. His discovery of the Titanic in 1985 had made him a household name. But his interest in the Black Sea was not driven by fame. It was driven by a hypothesis he found irresistible, that beneath those dark waters lay one of the most important archaeological sites in human history. In 1999, Ballard returned to the Black Sea with a research vessel, remotely operated submersibles, and a team of scientists from multiple disciplines. His goal was simple: find evidence of human habitation on the ancient submerged shoreline. What he found exceeded expectations. Using sonar imaging and underwater cameras, Ballard's team located rectangular stone structures resting on the seafloor at a depth of over 300 feet. Timber beams, still solid, still intact, lay nearby, their grain visible even after millennia underwater. Radiocarbon dating of the wood and surrounding sediment placed the structures at approximately 7,500 years old, right at the edge of the flood. Ballard did not claim to have found a city. He did not call it Atlantis or Eden or any other mythical place. He was more careful than that. But he did say this: "We have found a site that could change our understanding of early human migration and the origins of civilization, because the implications were staggering. If people were living on that shoreline when the flood came, and if those people fled and carried their knowledge with them, then the Black Sea event was not just a regional disaster. It was a cultural catalyst. A moment when survival became migration, when loss became memory, when history became myth. Ballard's work opened a door, and behind that door, in the cold, silent depths, the past was waiting. The Black Sea is unlike any other body of water on Earth. Its surface appears normal enough: blue-gray waves, fishing boats, tourists on the beaches of Turkey and Romania. But beneath approximately 150 meters of depth, something strange happens. The water stops moving. No currents, no oxygen, no light. This is the anoxic zone, a layer of water so oxygen-deprived that almost nothing can live there. No fish, no plants, no scavengers, and crucially, no bacteria capable of decomposition. In most oceans, when something dies and sinks to the bottom, it is consumed. Bacteria break down organic matter. Worms and crustaceans pick apart the remains. Wood rots, cloth disintegrates, bone crumbles. But not here. In the Black Sea, the dead do not decay. They are preserved. This is why the shipwrecks found in the deep waters of the Black Sea are so extraordinary. Ancient wooden vessels lie on the seafloor with their masts still standing, their ropes still coiled, their hulls still intact. They look as though they sank yesterday, not 2,000 years ago. This preservation extends to everything. If there were structures down there, homes, tools, carvings, cloth, they would still be there, frozen in time, waiting. The Black Sea is not just a grave, it is an archive. A place where the past does not fade, does not erode, does not vanish into dust. A place where history lies in perfect stillness, held in the cold grip of water that does not forget. Somewhere in those depths, in the anoxic dark, there may still be evidence of the people who lived before the flood. Their homes, their boats, their possessions, untouched, uncorrupted, waiting for someone to find them. In 2018, a team of marine archaeologists from the Black Sea Maritime Archaeology Project made a discovery that stunned the world. Off the coast of Bulgaria, near the ancient port of Varna, they found not one but more than 60 shipwrecks, some dating back over 2,000 years. But these were not ordinary shipwrecks. They were intact, completely, impossibly intact. Wooden hulls, rigging, rudders, masts, even delicate carvings on the stern posts, all preserved, as if the ships had sunk only months ago. One vessel, a Greek trading ship from the classical period, had its steering oars still lashed to the deck. Another, a Byzantine merchant galley, retained coils of rope in the hold. The archaeologists described it as walking through a museum suspended in time. But the most haunting detail was this: some of the ships had cargo still aboard, amphorae filled with wine, clay jars sealed with wax, bronze tools wrapped in cloth. It was as if the crews had simply stepped off. The Black Sea's anoxic depths had turned these vessels into time capsules, preserving not just the ships themselves, but the moment of their sinking, the moment when the living world passed into stillness. They are ghost ships in the truest sense, echoes of journeys never completed, voyages stopped mid-course by storm or war or accident. And they lie there still, resting on the seafloor, crewed by silence. Centuries after the flood, something remarkable happened in the Near East. Cities began to rise. Not small villages, but true cities. Walled settlements with thousands of inhabitants, complex irrigation systems, temples, granaries, writing. Uruk, Eridu, Ur, the first urban centers in human history, emerging along the banks of the Tigris and Euphrates rivers in what scholars call the Fertile Crescent. For a long time, historians treated this as an isolated phenomenon, the natural result of agriculture and surplus grain leading to specialization and hierarchy. But some researchers began to notice patterns. The timeline was curious. The earliest phases of urbanization in Mesopotamia began around 6000 BCE, roughly 1,000 years after the Black Sea flood. The cultural markers were curious. Pottery styles, building techniques, and agricultural practices that appeared suddenly in Mesopotamia bore resemblances to earlier Neolithic traditions from southeastern Europe and Anatolia. The stories were curious. The Sumerians, the first people to write in Mesopotamia, told flood myths. Myths that predated the biblical account. Myths that described a world-ending deluge and a handful of survivors who preserved knowledge and life. Could it be coincidence? Or could the refugees of the Black Sea flood, carrying seeds, tools, livestock, and memory, have seeded the cultures that became the world's first civilizations? The theory is speculative. It cannot be proven with certainty. But it is tantalizing. Because if it is true, then the drowning of the Black Sea basin was not an ending. It was a catalyst. A moment of displacement that forced innovation. A trauma that became transformation. The flood did not destroy civilization. It scattered the seeds from which civilization grew. It was inevitable, perhaps, that someone would make the connection. Plato's Atlantis, the lost island civilization, destroyed in a single day and night by earthquake and flood, has haunted the Western imagination for over 2,000 years. Could the Black Sea flood be the historical kernel behind that myth? The parallels are seductive. A thriving civilization, a sudden catastrophe, a land swallowed by water, survivors carrying the memory into distant lands. In the decades since Ryan and Pittman's hypothesis was published, more than a few writers, documentarians, and amateur historians have suggested that the drowned settlements of the Black Sea are the real Atlantis. But here, caution is necessary. Plato's account, written in the 4th century BCE, describes Atlantis as a maritime empire with advanced technology, grand architecture, and imperial ambitions. The archaeological evidence from the Black Sea suggests something far more modest: Neolithic fishing villages, not Bronze Age palaces. Moreover, Plato explicitly places Atlantis beyond the Pillars of Hercules, the Strait of Gibraltar in the Atlantic Ocean. The geography does not match. And yet, The emotional truth of the Atlantis story, the idea of a world lost to water, of knowledge drowned, of a civilization erased, resonates with the Black Sea flood in a way that is hard to ignore. Perhaps Atlantis is not a place. Perhaps it is a pattern, a recurring human nightmare rooted in real events, amplified by time and retelling until it becomes myth. The Black Sea may not be Atlantis, but it reminds us why Atlantis endures. Because we know, deep in our bones, that the world can drown. Long before writing, long before cities, long before kings and scribes, there was memory. Memory passed from elder to child. Memory encoded in ritual, in song, in the shapes of constellations and the rhythms of seasonal ceremonies. Early humans were not primitive. They were careful. They knew that knowledge could be lost, that drought, disease, or disaster could wipe out a generation. That survival depended on preserving what had been learned, so they became engineers of memory. They built monuments aligned to the stars. They carved symbols into stone. They told stories that carried practical information disguised as narrative. How to read the weather, where to find water, when to plant, and when to harvest. And when catastrophe struck, when the sea rose, when the volcano erupted, when the river changed course, they encoded that too. The flood became more than a story. It became a warning. Asterisk, this happened once. It can happen again. Do not forget, asterisk. Anthropologists studying oral traditions have found that some indigenous cultures can preserve accurate historical information for hundreds, even thousands of years through storytelling alone. Aboriginal Australians, for instance, have oral histories describing coastal flooding at the end of the last ice age, events that occurred over 10,000 years ago. The Black Sea flood, if it happened as the hypothesis suggests, would have been seared into the memory of every survivor. And those survivors would have made sure their descendants remembered. Not through books or monuments, they had neither, but through story, told and retold, refined and ritualized, until it became sacred, until it became myth. The flood did not need to be written down to be remembered. It was tattooed into the soul of every culture that survived it. 7,000 years have passed since the Black Sea flood, and yet the pattern is repeating, not suddenly, not catastrophically, but unmistakably. The seas are rising again. Glaciers in Greenland and Antarctica are melting at accelerating rates. Thermal expansion is causing ocean levels to climb. Coastal cities, Miami, Venice, Bangkok, New Orleans, are already experiencing chronic flooding. Scientists project that by the end of this century, sea levels could rise by 1 to 2 meters. In low-lying regions, entire nations could be submerged. Millions of people will be displaced. History does not repeat, but it rhymes. The people of the Black Sea Basin did not cause their flood. It was the inevitable result of planetary forces, melting ice, rising water, geological pressure. But we are causing ours. And the parallels are haunting. Just as the ancient lake dwellers watched the water creep closer, day by day, we watch storm surges grow higher. Tides push further inland. Neighborhoods turn into wetlands. Just as they fled, carrying what they could, future refugees will flee from islands, from coasts, from deltas that no longer hold. And just as their flood became myth, ours will become history. The Black Sea teaches us something uncomfortable. The world we build is temporary. The systems we trust, coastlines, climates, the stability of land and sea, are not fixed. They are dynamic. And when they shift, no amount of technology or wealth can hold back the water. The sea does not care about borders. It does not care about monuments. It takes what it will, and it remembers. Off the coast of the Bulgarian town of Sozopol, there is a local legend that fishermen still tell. They say that on stormy nights, when the wind howls and the waves crash high, you can hear bells ringing beneath the water. Church bells. The legend claims that long ago, a great city stood on the coast, a city with churches and towers and markets. But the sea rose, and the city drowned. The bells of its churches were dragged down into the deep, and now when the water stirs them, they ring, a warning, a lament. For years, this was dismissed as folklore. But in recent underwater surveys near Sozopol, archaeologists have found submerged stone structures, walls, foundations, carved blocks, dating back to the Byzantine period and earlier. There are no bells. Not yet, anyway. But their asterisks are asterisk stones. And when storms pass overhead, when the currents shift and the sediment swirls, divers report an eerie sound, a low, resonant hum that seems to come from the ruins themselves. Not bells, perhaps, but something like singing. The stones remember. The deeper you go into the Black Sea, the stranger it becomes. At 300 feet, sonar begins to reveal features that do not quite fit the natural topography. Terraces that are too regular, mounds that are too symmetrical, linear formations that suggest intention. At 400 feet, remotely operated vehicles have captured images of stone structures partially buried in silt, rectangles, alignments, walls. At 500 feet, there is nothing but darkness, cold, and the chemical stillness of anoxic water. But the structures are still there. One site, surveyed in 2016 off the coast of Turkey, showed what appeared to be a series of low stone platforms arranged in a crescent shape. The stones themselves bore no obvious tool marks, but their placement was deliberate. Another site, near the Crimean Peninsula, revealed what some researchers believe could be a collapsed timber structure, possibly a dwelling or storage building, resting on what was once the shore of the ancient lake. These are not grand ruins. They do not rival Pompeii or Machu Picchu, but they are human. And that is enough, because every stone placed by human hands is a message. A message that says, asterisk, we were here. We lived. We built. We mattered. Asterisk, the deep does not erase that message. It preserves it. And the dead, whoever they were, whatever they built, remain below, silent and patient, waiting for the day when the living come looking for them. It is easy to focus on what survives, the shells, the stones, the timber beams. But what about what was lost? The Black Sea flood did not just drown land, it drowned language. It drowned songs. It drowned names. Every village that disappeared beneath the water had a name. Every family had stories. Every child knew songs that would never be sung again. How many languages were spoken along those shores? How many gods were worshipped? How many innovations, techniques for weaving, for fishing, for navigating by the stars, were lost because the people who knew them drowned or fled? We will never know. There are no written records, no inscriptions, no monuments declaring, asterisk, this was ours, this was who we were. Just the faint outline of walls beneath the silt. That is the true tragedy of the flood. Not just the loss of life, but the loss of asterisk memory asterisk. The water took more than land. It took identity, and in doing so, it rendered an entire world invisible. In the mythology of many ancient cultures, the sky is a mirror of the earth. Rivers become constellations, mountains become stars. Events of cosmic significance are written in the movements of the heavens. Some scholars have proposed that the memory of the Black Sea flood may have been encoded not just in stories, but in the stars themselves. Consider the constellation we call Aquarius, the water-bearer. In ancient Babylonian astronomy, this constellation was associated with the god Ea, the deity of fresh water, wisdom, and the great flood. Ea warned Utnapishtim of the coming deluge and instructed him to build the ark. Consider the Milky Way. In many cultures, it is described as a river in the sky, a celestial waterway that souls travel after death, or a reflection of earthly rivers now lost to time. Could these be echoes? Could the ancients, looking up at the night sky, have placed their memories of drowned lands among the stars, ensuring that even if the physical world forgot, the heavens would remember? It is impossible to prove, but there is something poetic about the idea that the water which drowned the world below is mirrored in the stars above, that the flood is not just history, not just myth, but a permanent fixture of the cosmos, an eternal reminder that the world is mutable, fragile, and precious. In some parts of the Black Sea, in the deepest anoxic layers, something extraordinary happens. Bacteria that thrive without oxygen produce hydrogen sulfide as a byproduct of their metabolism. In high concentrations, this gas is toxic, flammable, and smells of rotten eggs. But in the Black Sea, the hydrogen sulfide does not disperse. It accumulates. In certain zones, it forms layers so dense that the water itself seems to shimmer and pulse as though the sea were breathing. Divers who have descended into these zones describe an eerie luminescence, a faint glow produced by bioluminescent bacteria thriving in the chemical soup. The water looks alive, but it is a kind of life that exists in the absence of everything we associate with living. No light, no oxygen, no warmth, just slow chemical processes unfolding in the dark. It is beautiful, and it is terrifying, because it reminds us that life, in some form, persists even in the most hostile environments. That the Black Sea, for all its stillness, is not truly dead. It is waiting. Miami Beach floods on sunny days now. Venice has raised its floodgates. Jakarta is sinking. The Maldives are preparing to relocate their entire population. This is not alarmism. It is observation. The seas are rising, not as fast as the Black Sea flood, not yet, but relentlessly. And the people living on coastlines today are beginning to ask the same questions the lake dwellers must have asked 7,000 years ago. Asterisk, how much time do we have? Asterisk, asterisk, where will we go? Asterisk, asterisk, what do we take with us? Climate scientists speak in terms of projections and models, but the Black Sea flood reminds us that projections can be wrong. That change, when it comes, can be faster and more catastrophic than anyone expects. The difference this time is that we know it is coming. We can see the ice melting. We can measure the water rising. We can calculate with chilling precision which cities will be underwater by 2100. But knowing does not mean stopping. Just as the Black Sea flood could not be stopped by the people living through it, our rising seas cannot be stopped, only slowed, adapted to, survived. And if we survive, what will we remember? Will we encode our flood in myth, as they did? Will future generations tell stories of the cities that drowned, New York, Shanghai, London, and wonder if they were real? Or will we, unlike the lake dwellers, preserve our memory in concrete ways, in data, in archives, in monuments that float? Only time will tell. But one thing is certain, the flood is coming. Again, the camera descends slowly through layers of light. First, the sun-dappled surface, blue and alive, full of motion. Then the twilight zone, dim, cool, still inhabited by fish and plankton. Then the threshold, the point where oxygen ends, where life, as we know it, stops. And finally, the deep, the anoxic abyss. Here, there is no color, no sound, no current, just the faint, ghostly shapes of things that should not still be whole. A timber beam, lying on its side, still carved with the marks of ancient tools. A stone wall, half buried in silt, its edges softened by millennia, but unmistakably built. A scatter of pottery shards, their painted designs faded, but not gone. And somewhere, deeper still, beyond the reach of cameras and lights, there may be more. Entire villages, streets, hearths where fires once burned, all of it preserved in the cold, silent grip of water that does not forget. The narrator speaks softly, as if unwilling to disturb the stillness. Asterisk, maybe all civilizations end the same way. Not with fire, not with war, but with water, with the quiet return of the sea. Asterisk, the Black Sea does not give up its dead. It holds them, remembers them, preserves them in a darkness so complete it becomes a kind of eternity. Asterisk, asterisk, we will never know their names. We will never hear their language. We will never read the stories they told their children around the fire. Asterisk, asterisk, but we know they were here. Asterisk, asterisk, and in knowing that, we touch something ancient and fragile and profoundly human. Asterisk, asterisk, the fear that we will be forgotten. Asterisk, asterisk, the hope that we will be remembered. Asterisk, the camera lingers on the submerged stones. Then, slowly, it begins to rise. Back toward the light, back toward the surface, back to the world that still breathes and moves and lives, for now. Asterisk, if you found meaning in this journey through time and water, consider sharing it. Consider exploring more of what lies beneath the surface, not just of the sea, but of history, memory, and the stories we tell ourselves about who we are. Asterisk, asterisk, thank you for watching. Asterisk, the screen fades to black. Not darkness, silence, the kind of silence that waits beneath the waves.